Kia ora koutou whānau. How is everybody? Chewy, my friend. How are you, sir?
Hello.
Hello.
I am just exhausted.
How come? Oh, how, is the kitchen? The kitchen's going on?
Yeah, there's a room in our house that should be a kitchen. No, we've been painting and we've got to bring a floor up now and it's a lot. I think we're at the point that anybody that's done home renovations knows that we're just over it. We just want it to be done.
Is it going to is it like going to, when I say to timing, like is the timing working at the moment, or is it taking longer than it should, which is often the case?
Oh, it's taking longer than I think. I think I went into it with the traditional it should be right. 3 weeks we'll be done. We'll only be missing a kitchen for like a week.
Yeah,
now
right.
We're on week 3.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I guess I'm thinking when I say as long as it should, you know what? I guess what I'm saying, as long as longer than they said that would take. That's what I mean. I'm not meaning.
And we've got a builder, and he's great. He does great work, but he is not the best communicator, and we also don't know what questions we should be asking. So sometimes it's a fantastic sort of like, okay, we're just checking in on where, what's next, and he goes, oh yeah, well, the plaster will be there on Sunday. Once he's finished, you'll want to paint the walls and the ceiling, and then we'll mount the cabinets. And we go, oh shit, painting. So we spent a couple of days like prepping and painting, and then pat on the back, job well done. And then it's like, oh, and you'll need to lift the floor up so we can mount the cabinets, the old lino and stuff. And
you should have said. So that's my one trick, bro. You know, everyone has one trick. That's my one trick about how to get lino up. You should have called me. I would have totally given you the hint.
I'm still taking advice at this point.
Have you got it up yet? Have you got the lino up yet?
Oh God, no, because it's 3 generations of lino glued to each other.
Easy. Really, really easy to do. Would you like to know?
Yeah, please. Is it fire? Are you going to say fire?
I did this in a when I was living in Auckland. We did a bathroom, and I did it up there. You know those, and this is a really good tip. Like I did this off the cuff and figured it out. And I've told people who do this, and they're like, "Shit, that's a really good idea." So like, I want credit for this if anyone uses it or passes it on. You know those big squares that you put on the wall when you're taking down wallpaper, and they soften the wallpaper, and then you scrape it off.
I've got one of them. Yeah.
Use that on the floor. It melts the glue, peels off. Honestly, really, really, really easy. Use that on the floor. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. We did it. And because what it does is it's so hot, it melts the glue. You peel it off. You have the one downside from it, for example, from scraping it off with a big spade or something, is you do have a lot of a sticky floor. Right, it's very sticky afterwards. But what we did, because we were getting the floors polished, was we just actually put a bit of sawdust on it, sort of thing, because they were going to sand it anyway, and it fixed it up for the time being. But like a wallpaper remover, put it on the floor, put it going, let it heat. It'll heat it up, and it should just peel off. Honestly, it's my one DIY bit of knowledge.
I might try that, because I do have a wallpaper steamer here. Also. I've spoken on the people that used to own this house that decided that peach bathroom furniture was a good idea. We got to see on the layers of lino what choices they make there, and these people are monsters. I want to travel back in time and murder the family that used to live here. I hate them.
Yeah, no, I've got burgundy everywhere in this house from the 90s. So there's burgundy over all the walls. Down here in the studio, you can't see it because you can't quite see to the walls. I repainted all of this white. Well, it's kind of an off-white. But all through the rest of the house, it's burgundy walls. I'm just like, geez. Hello, 90s. We want our paint job back.
Fake vinyl looking like terracotta tiles, and then underneath that is just this aggressive orange lino. It's disgusting. Yeah.
Yes. Well, it's good to have everyone back. Thanks to be back. Thanks for being back with us, is what I was trying to say, trying to get my words out there. And I would be excited to get into tonight's show. There's one topic that's come up quite late on to do with cancel culture, and it's kind of an interesting one, actually. I'm quite looking forward to talking about it, because there's that old saying that if you're not liberal when you're young, you've got no heart, and if you're not conservative when you're old, you've got no brain. I think that saying's wrong. I think there is plenty of evidence that just goes, as the next generation comes on, it gets more and more liberal or progressive or something like that. And I think we have evidence for that tonight, and I want to have a bit of a look at it. And yeah, we'll see how it goes, because of a little story that I found whilst I was sitting on the toilet. Popped up in my news feed.
No one needs to hear how the sausage is made, Pat.
Yeah, open all hours, Ronnie Barker. Is that right? That's what it sounded like. Is that what you were doing? See, I know, I got it. As you'll see, rolling along the bottom of our screen as well, massive thanks to our $50 patrons, Kooky Nick and Alex Davis as well. If you are a patron on our page, then this weekend we're looking to have a group chat, a patrons only chat. I've sent out emails and messages today to everybody to give them a bit of a heads up, and then we're going to make it available to everybody who's joined in so far, because we appreciate you all. As we move forward, people who are part of our Patreon, there are levels of benefits. In fact, I should show you what the Patreon is, and the level of benefit normally for live Q&As is $35 a month, but because everyone's come on board so well so early and helped us out just over a couple of weeks, we're just going to make this week's one available to everybody, and maybe next month's as well, and then eventually when we kick in with these official sort of levels, we will change it. As a part of the $50 producer, it says as a part of your Patreon level, you get name in the credits pre and or post roll. So as you can see going along the bottom, there is your name in the credits, Kooky Nick and Alex Davis, during our pre and or post roll. This would be a pre-roll before the show starts. So there you go. That's how it sort of works. And hopefully at some stage we'll have so many people joining in and being involved at that level, we'll have to put up like a big page and it'll have hundreds of names on it. But at the moment, it's just a couple of lovely people at that level, and we thank you. All right. Yeah, hey, dude, if you need a hand, give us a call as well. I'll come up there with the old paintbrush and give you a hand if any of that kind of stuff. I'm good at that sort of thing. We'll get up there and have a have whatever the equivalent of a roof shout is. We'll do a wall painting shout or whatever it is.
A barn raising.
Barn raising.
Big Amish barn in my backyard.
Let's have a look at what we're going to talk about tonight. One of the topics, or one of the main things we're going to focus on tonight, kind of dovetails into itself, because there are multiple topics coming from one interview or one story. The first lot is surrounding Gaurav Sharma and his attempt to re-win Hamilton West, how National will be involved in it. And another is about, maybe I've missed it, maybe you know more about this than I do, Chewy, or maybe someone in the chat can inform us. But for some reason, I think it's to do with Liz Truss in the UK, doing the top rate tax breaks going so badly that Labour is now pointing their finger, pointing the bone, as they say, at National, going, this is what's going to happen when you do it. Because I don't think there's been any massive announcements around National and tax in the last few days, but there's a bit of a resurgence at the moment talking about what National will do with the tax coffers and what's going to happen. So that's going to be there's kind of two parts in one conversation there. We might also have a quick look at Three Waters, because there was, what is it called? That sounds like the most boring thing to see in the world. An industry event, water industry event over the weekend. And the water industry event, I think there was 1,500 people there from the water industry. I'll show you the headline. We'll get into a bit later on. The representatives there agree reforms are long overdue. And the summation of that kind of, this is from people in the industry. The summation of that is Three Waters seems to be a good idea, but they think people are very much communicating it poorly and the public doesn't understand what's going on. Now, I'm paraphrasing their thoughts, so don't jump on me just quite about it, but we'll have a chance to have a look at that as we go through the night as well. So you weren't here last night, True Meister General, and we talked a little bit about this because it was sort of breaking news yesterday. So Gaurav Sharma has received financial backing from a wealthy businessman, and this was a breaking story on News Hub. Let's have a look what they had to say.
News Hub can reveal Rebel MP Dr Sharma has the financial backing of a wealthy businessman who says money is no object.
The Prime Minister is yet to set a date for the Hamilton West by-election triggered by Sharma's resignation, but is already attempting to paint Labor as the underdog. Here's political editor Jenna Lynch again.
2020, Jacinda Ardern on the campaign trail with rising star Dr Sharma in Hamilton West. And back they trot for a by-election, but this time on opposing teams.
My hope would have been it just wouldn't happen at all.
Hopes are free, democracy is not. By-elections cost about $1.2 million to run, funded by you.
It's a waste of taxpayers' money.
I completely acknowledge, the cost of the by-election, and it is unfortunate that this is what it has come to.
It's come to this because Sharma was convinced the PM was going to kick him out of Parliament using the waka jumping legislation, spurred on by the Labor Party recommending that Dr Sharma be expelled from the party.
Now, we talked a bit about this last night. This is news that's come out since last night. Dr Sharma was saying that he had heard from people that he was about to be expelled. Labor Party, or the governing body, has said that there was a recommendation that Gaurav be expelled from the party, but there's no evidence that we've been shown, at least, grain of salt maybe, but there's no evidence being released right now that says that he was then also going to be forced to resign. Being expelled from the party doesn't necessarily mean gone from your seat. So I think what it appears that as we take the word of the people at the moment, until proven otherwise, I think that's fair, that's what we can fairly do, is that there was an idea to get him out of the party, but there doesn't seem to be any evidence yet. We'll always say yet, because who knows, a day is a long time in politics, that they were going to try and force him out of his seat as well. In fact, I think it's probably fair to say that if Labor had have done that, it would have been a terrible look and another nail in that coffin, because then you could have said Labor is costing the taxpayers $1.2 million. Now, National's trying to do that anyway, and we'll get to some of that shortly. But at the moment, the cost of that has to be put on Gaurav's, Dr Sharma's shoulders. If they had have expelled him and then kicked him out of his seat, it would have been another, National Party headline. This government doesn't know what they're doing when it comes to the taxpayers' money. That would have been. So yeah, until known otherwise, that seems to be the case. Yes, Stuart.
Am I right in thinking that even if they had kicked him out of the party, he'd still be the representative for Hamilton East? He still would have had a seat in Parliament, right? We
looked at this last night, Hamilton West, by the way, just for people who are wondering. We looked at this last night, and we kind of learned on the fly that it seems that there is a law or a rule that's been put in place that if you either leave a party or are expelled from the party, you can be forced to give up your seat, which is bizarre, because it seems that if you're leaving a party for whatever reasons, that a party can then expel you from your elected seat is a strange thing. I wonder if it has some basis in the fact that if you're a list MP and you left, then there's nowhere to go. Maybe they have decided to connect those two things together or something. I'm not sure about that, but maybe that's a reason. But I guess what I'm saying is, I don't think there has been any evidence yet that we've seen yet that, well, the Labor Party has told us that this was an idea bouncing around. Doesn't necessarily mean he was going to be expelled, but I'm pretty sure that it's fair to say that there's been no evidence showing yet that he was also then going to be kicked out of his seat. So it may have ended up being that he was expelled from the party and left in the seat. I guess what Dr Sharma is saying, he was going to be expelled from the party and kicked out of the seat. I guess unless we see evidence otherwise, we will never know the truth in that. But until we see evidence, I think it's appropriate to go, well, this is what it appears to be right now. And I'm comfortable with that at the moment. So we'll get some more of the story. Here we go.
And, I preempted it. And what I want to make sure is that people of Hamilton West have a voice in Parliament, whoever they choose.
Where did he get this idea that you were going to waka jump him?
Unfortunately, I have no idea.
So off to the polls you go, Hamiltonians. Expensive not just for the taxpayer, but a raid on political parties' piggy banks ahead of election year. What's your war chest looking like for a by-election?
Look, we're going to be ready to go. We're going to have a great candidate. We're going to have a great campaign.
The Labor Party always puts money away for a rainy day.
It's going to be very hard for me to run this by-election. I don't have the machinery. I don't have the similar amount of funds.
But Newshub can reveal Sharma has cash if he wants it. Roshan Nauhria, a wealthy Indian businessman and former leader of the failed People's Party, has told Newshub he will both bankroll Sharma himself and seek donations from others to help out too, saying, "I will support him financially 100%, wholeheartedly. Doesn't matter the money, whatever he needs."
Well, look, there's lots of people who have offered to, provide support.
I heard that headline, and I did think that idea about we tell ourselves in New Zealand that we don't have money in politics. Like you hear about that idea in America about money in politics, and you hear about things like the Koch brothers, or what's the guy name that the right like to demonize? He's got a Jewish name.
It's George Soros.
Soros. We hear about these individuals bankrolling, senators or Congress people, and everyone's saying, like, we don't need money in politics. When I hear this, I'm not saying there's anything untoward, but it sounds like someone saying, I will give this person whatever money they need to get back into parliament. It sounds like money in politics. So I'm intrigued as to what that means and how that works amongst like the laws of New Zealand that says we don't have money in politics like countries like America do. So I guess once again that will be revealed as we go along as well.
Support.
Labor trying to label itself the long shot before anyone has even picked a candidate.
In recent times, we have been the underdog in that seat, and I do think it would be a very robust and tough by-election.
So they're not the underdogs. They've got a huge machinery behind them.
Managing expectations in case Labor gets trounced in the Tron. Jenna Lynch.
I don't think Labor are the underdogs. I think Gaurav Sharma is the underdogs, but I also think that
absolutely.
if you were to put money on an election result for next year today, I think my opinion is your money would be on National today. So therefore, if your money was on National for the win overall, is your money on National for this seat? Now, I said last night, Chewy, and I'll say it again so you hear it as well. My money's on Labor retaining the seat for one main reason, is that Gaurav Sharma will split the vote between the right, and Labor will walk in. So I think that's where I'm putting my $5. Someone wants to give me 10-1 odds. I'm happy to do that. I'll chuck that in the kitty. But I've long stopped thinking about predicting elections or election results. In fact, I was going to write a post about an upcoming mayoralty election and what I thought was going to happen, and I'm so glad I didn't, because I'm well beyond predicting what's going to happen. So I'll put a cheeky beer on it. The Labor will get through, but the reason it's a cheeky beer and not my house is it could go anywhere. Who fucking knows? So now look, just to let people know as well, talking about the wealthy businessman, they said he was the former founder of the People's Party. People's Party is a political party in New Zealand. The party was established in 2015, has a particular focus on the rights of immigrants. It operated as an independent party for the 2016 by-election and the 2017 general election. It was a component party of Advance New Zealand in the 2020 election. The party's leader as of September 2020 is Anil Sharma. So there's not too much on Wikipedia about what they stood for or where their party actually were, but I guess you got to see if they're involved with Advance New Zealand and Jamie Lee Ross.
Yeah.
That probably speaks. I'm not trying to paint them in any brush, but just other than to say that speaks a little bit about sort of who they are and what they're about.
I read an interesting tweet thread today, actually, from someone in the New Zealand Indian community that was sort of putting their opinion on who's backing him and why he's backing him and that sort of thing, and drawing some pretty strong links towards that businessman having very strong links with the Hindu right-wing movement.
Okay.
From India, and just trying to get a toehold here in New Zealand, and that it is very, very definitely a right-wing movement. So yeah, it's interesting. Like, I mean, we've had no reason to pay attention to Sharma before this all kicked off, and I think if you cast your mind back when it first did kick off, I was like, well, let's hear the guy out, because bullying in Parliament has been an issue going on, and I've just seen people's attitudes shift, and it's just people going, this guy with his 4,500 page, words, Facebook rants and that sort of thing. And then just the only people that seem to be rallying behind him are the anti-Labour, anti-Ardern, anti-government kooks. So I can't see how he can carry this by-election. But he's definitely got people whispering in his ear going, yeah, man, you've got this.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I also approached Dr. Sharma to come on Friday night's show. I'm like, it could be interesting. I'm down for having a chat to this gentleman about what he's about and what's going on. Funnily enough, like on his Facebook page, it still has a parliamentary email address, which I sent an email to that has bounced back. I understand that maybe his Labour stuff will have bounced back, but his parliamentary email has bounced back. Or maybe, no, because he isn't. I was about to say he's not in Parliament anymore. No, he is in Parliament. He's not in government. He's in Parliament. So
I think I might have the answer to that.
Go on then.
So obviously you remember that Parliamentary Services had put a freeze on him hiring new staff.
Yeah.
Because of turnover in his office. There was one person left. Right. And that person has, I believe they won a council seat, so is no longer working in his office. There's no one there. So there's no PAs, no electorate staff in his office anymore.
No. Well, I mean, I'll approach him again. I'm not suggesting it's going to happen, but often Friday nights, if we can get a topic going with one topic and get people involved, and if you want to check out what it is, then we'll see if we can get Dr. Sharma on to talk all this through, because I guess, as we always try and do here, we try and go to the source, whether that source is, a piece of information about, research that's been talked about. We want to go to the research, or we want to go to the expert who's done the research, or we want to go to the person at the center of the story. So we'll see if we can get him. I mean, to be honest with you, unlikely, but we'll give it a crack. We always give it a crack. You know that. All right. Now, the other part of this was not part of this story, but it's kind of come up alongside the story, was the conversation again around National and their tax cuts. And I believe a lot of it has to do with Liz Truss in the UK and the Labour Party kind of firing at Christopher Luxon that he's going to be New Zealand's Liz Truss. Now, I'll be really honest with you. I'm about to play a little bit of footage here. I'm not that comfortable with the way Grant Robertson is acting in this clip towards Christopher Luxon. I mean, I'm probably being a little bit precious, and I'm aware of that. But to use Liz Truss's name as a basically as a swear word, like you're using it to mock, and in the way I'm just like, I know they say it's like cats and dogs and school kids the best. I'm just like, I don't know. I don't want to feel a bit like too much of a boomer or too much like a stiff upper lip kind of guy, but the decorum pretty much goes out of the house. I'm not saying that others don't do it, but I'll play it for you. You have a look yourself and have a listen. I think maybe it's that aggressively screaming at someone, calling them a female name, just feels a bit not what the Labour Party says they stand for. Like screaming at him and using a female's name as a way to mock him doesn't feel like the Labour Party that seems to stand up for so many, rights for people, especially women and stuff as well, to then use a woman as a way to embarrass or whatever. And I know she's a public figure, and I know it's about her policies, but it just, I don't know, it smacked a little bit to me of a tad amount of inappropriateness, a little bit. Maybe I'm being a bit precious. Let's have a listen to the conversation. I believe the part of the conversation we're about to look at was when they were in the House and the Prime Minister was talking about what the National Party is going to do with tax cuts.
Which we know because we've seen a live experiment of what would happen when such proposals are implemented. And Mr. Speaker, the impact on the economy is, Mr. Speaker, very, very clear. And he's taken no reflection on what happened in the UK when they implemented a very similar program of debt funded tax cuts.
So before we go back to his response, tell me, am I being too precious, or is it a little bit like this is, you know what someone said to me the other day, someone who works quite high up in radio said to me of the Heather Duplessis-Allen thing with Izzy Cook. This is what they said. They went, a bad idea poorly implemented. That was how they portrayed, you know, the way that Heather treated the 16-year-old in there. So let me say that about this. A bad idea poorly implemented by Grant Robertson. What do you say, Chewy?
I don't think I'm picking up on the same thing that you are there.
Okay.
I mean, I'm immediately going back to what we've spoken about a couple of times here, where the left tends to jump on itself and going, oh, no, you're not playing by the rules. I'm sure we have seen banter from both sides of the house.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that I'm not giving National a pass from this. I'm as I always say, I'm playing each ball on its merits, and I'm having a look at this one here. And look, I don't think it's also about comparing him to Liz Truss and what she did. I don't know. Okay, so people are saying that I'm being a bit precious. I'll own that. That's fine. To me, it just felt a bit more like using that name. It's like if I started calling people Chewy because I was really calling them a fuckwit. That you're a bit of a Chewy.
Oh, I can definitely see what you're picking up on. I'm not dismissing it out of hand. I think Luxon himself invited those links when Liz Truss got in, and made statements going, we share a lot in common. We have similar values.
Wow.
And it's like, whoa, do you really want to nail your flag to that particular flag?
And look, I think all of that is fair. Like I think it's perfectly fair to talk about the tax ideas, talk about that stuff. I don't know. It was okay. Look, okay. So I'm being a little bit overly precious. I mean, it's weird, but this is what I do, because what it sounds like is I'm defending Christopher Luxon, but I'll always, put my opinion where I think. I think in that instance, from the way it was done, it doesn't feel quite right to me. Now, the content of what the Prime Minister was saying, completely fine. No argument with that. No problems with that. But as where did it just go? Simon just said here as well, Jacinda is a good cop, Grant is the bad cop.
Yep.
Sure, get it. And I guess, and I'm not doing this to give anyone else in Parliament a pass, because I know everyone does it. I'm just looking at this one incident in isolation. Anyway, so that's the example. Then they go on in the AM show to talk to Mr. Luxon about this, and we'll have that part of the conversation right now.
How do you feel being compared to Liz Truss?
Well, I think they are the words of a very, very desperate Prime Minister, to be brutally honest with you. Inflation is high and worse than expected at 7.2%. It's leading to higher prices. It's leading to higher interest rates. It's causing huge pain and suffering for New Zealanders up and down this country. And it's all because this government doesn't have a proper economic plan to lead New Zealand through a cost of living crisis.
So here we go.
Now
let's get
back to that well, don't we?
Well, let's get to the meat of it. And I've jotted down, it's not an exact quote, but this government doesn't have a proper economic plan. So here's the questions I want to ask Mr. Luxon that I wish a journalist would. Why are we doing so well compared to most countries in the world then? Why is our inflation, albeit high and not good, better than most of the world, and certainly better than 90% of our like-minded countries? What would National have inflation at right now if they were in office? Remember, we asked this of Michael Woodhouse. So what would inflation be if you were in office right now? And what does National commit to getting inflation to when they take office? Like, will it drop by 2 points within a year? What are you going to do? What effects and difference are you going to do? I think this idea of that we're doing so badly, it's that, I always think about when people move to a new city. And like you move from Auckland to Dunedin, yeah? And you're like, oh, this traffic's a breeze. And then all of a sudden you've lived there for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years, and the traffic in Dunedin is the worst fucking traffic in the world because it's relative. Now, relative to our daily lives, yeah, this inflation feels terrible. Yeah, the economy feels hard. Money feels tight. But actually, compared to the rest of the world, New Zealand's doing surprisingly well. So if there is no economic plan, or a poor economic plan, or they've got no idea what they're doing, why is New Zealand doing better than most in the world right now?
No, because we can't talk about that. We can't bring that up in an interview, because it'll show that I'm quite fond of the UK government, and that's basically what we were going to try, and it's failed, and their inflation's over 10% now, and shit, fuck, bugger. But yeah, it's something that angers me is that when they look at inflation and they talk about inflation, it's all Labor's fault and they've got no plan. But it's just assuming that nobody's going to look at what's happening elsewhere in the world.
Well, I think the problem is most voters aren't, because they're like that relativity, right? Right, the traffic in Dunedin or wherever you live, the traffic in Taranaki or the traffic in Gisborne or whatever, that eventually gets too much for you. And although it does only actually take an extra 3 minutes to get home, you're like, oh my goodness, because it's relative to you. I think most people don't look to see that. I think the average OECD inflation at the moment is 10.3%. They don't look to see that. What they look to see is how bad it is affecting them in their pockets, in their wallet today, in their house. And I think that's an unfortunate part of the situation. And the other thing to think about, and I'm sure this will happen as a lead up to the election, I don't think by us, because I don't think we'll ever get access to probably either Jacinda or Mr. Luxon, is the question, what would you be doing right now? What would you have inflation at, and how would you have inflation at a different level? And what will inflation be 12 months after you start? You know, what do you commit to getting it down to, and how are you going to do it? Those questions aren't being asked yet, maybe because it's too far off from the election, or maybe it's just that we've got shithouse mainstream journalists who don't want to go one step deeper because they've got 7 minutes between two ad breaks.
Well, I, Chris Luxon, am going to cut the top tax rate, and then through some sort of wingo wango magic, economic wizardry, it's going to spur the economy into a backflip, and we're going to be awesome, and everything's going to be great. And don't dig any deeper than that. Like this is just trickle down bullshit. It's been so disproven time and time again.
Like that one there from Kim.
Yep. There we go. Yeah. And I mean, Nicola Willis was coming at that from another angle earlier today. We don't need to increase tax on the wealthy just so we can fund social programs. We'll just do a social bond situation where wealthy people can choose to fund social services somehow. They've tried that before, it failed, but we'll try it again. And it just sounds like, oh, well, instead of taxing them properly, we'll just give them, if they want to, they can. Like, and it fell over? Really, I'm shocked.
There's also, I mean, this whole thing about why aren't you asking this question? There's another thing that Mr. Luxon says in the next 60 seconds. So let's just get back to this, and then we've got some other things we want to have a look at to do with the tax situation as well.
The tax cuts have hurt the UK economy, though, right? And Liz Truss's U-turn has been quite embarrassing. Is there a risk you could end up in the same kind of situation?
Look, completely and utterly different situations. Here's the story. The bottom line is that, the UK has very high levels of debt. It has uncapped amounts of stimulus, and it had a wholesale change to its tax program and agenda. That's a completely different situation from what's being proposed here. We have a government here in New Zealand that's...
Yes, sir. You want to add something in?
So hang on. He's saying that we have a completely different situation, that the UK has heaps and heaps of debt and is in a bad position. Isn't that what he's saying about us? But it's different somehow.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. $1 billion more each and every week. It's actually raising a huge amount of extra tax, almost the equivalent to $15,000 per household in New Zealand. This is a government that actually could, if it was responsible, if it knew how to run an economy, deliver people some income tax relief. The best way to do that is not rinky-dink band-aid cost of living payments. It's to adopt our main thrust, which is to lift inflation adjust tax thresholds, so that people keep more of their own money to keep managing, to navigate the cost of living crisis. And the other thing is they could deliver that tax relief and also deliver better public services, because in the space of public services, despite all that spending, everything's going backwards.
Okay, so this is the next point that I wanted to bring out about this. The next question I want, and let me just go to my notes because I did jot this down. To deliver tax breaks and get better public services. My only question is how?
Yeah.
Like
Magic.
how do you reduce? Yeah, someone did. Oh, it was a row. I think that's a Harry Potter reference, isn't it? Expelliarmus inflation.
Inflation's gone. Like he's going to come out with a fucking wizard hat robe next.
Let's ask you this, Chewy. You're doing some renovations on the house right now, yeah? So your budget is $30,000. I'm saying that's what your budget is. Now I'm going to take $20,000 of your budget away, right? I want you to deliver me a better kitchen, right? And better services within your house at the same time. So you've got to keep the money, and I want to see a better kitchen as well. Is that how does that happen? You've got less money in the coffers, right? Because it's gone back to the public. How do you then also deliver better public services?
But
yeah, nice. That was perfectly voiced, I think.
Thanks. But yeah, no, we'll say that to get us into office. We'll win the election, and then we won't follow up on anything because we can't. Because we know we can't, because we've just spent 8 years criticizing and not solving any problem. So, yeah, we keep on coming back to the same thing. Is he just willfully clueless, or is he lying? And I think the longer this goes on, the further I'm in lying camp.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to watch a clip from a few months ago that people know about. I've just had a message from Parliament that my message has been delayed to Dr. Sharma. I don't know what that means. And that is when some people do hold his feet to the fire, and it was Jack Tame in this instance, how some of these things sometimes fall apart. And in that interview from Q&A back about 4 months ago, one of the points that was made, which is often made, is hang on. You're the money guy. You're the one who's selling your business now as a reason to run this country. If you're the money guy, I want the answers to the money questions. And if I'm being generous, and I'm okay to be generous, if I'm being generous, I'd say they don't have them all yet, and they will have them before the election. If I'm being pessimist, I'll say they're purposefully not looking for those answers because all they're trying to do is paint the current government in a negative light, and no one's challenging them. Well, very few people are challenging them on providing those answers.
Can we just say as well, just from an economic standpoint, how utterly insane it is to go after the last 2 years of COVID response and the money printer being switched on to keep everybody afloat and everybody's mortgages paid and their staff paid and that sort of thing, that immediately following that, any party would be promising a tax cut and cutting their revenue stream is insane and irresponsible. Like I don't see how even like people that support National traditionally would be like, oh yeah, no, this is a good idea. Like, so you've got to build the coffers back up, right?
Yes. So let's have a look at that and what that actually means. It probably leads us quite nicely into our next clip. Now, this clip was actually from about last week, I think. It's Cameron Baggery on the AM show again. Cameron Baggery, of course, economist, and he was asked. This conversation was about when the whole conversation in general was about the levy being put on farmers, but the last kind of 60 seconds of it, he was asked about tax cuts. And he was asked, should we be looking at tax cuts for next year's election? And this is what Cameron Baggery had to say last week.
If you gave me a choice between throwing a lot of money into the education sector and offering tax cuts, it's pretty much a no-brainer to me. I'd far rather that money got put aside for education as an investment in New Zealand's economic future.
There you go. So that's what I mean. Obviously, I'm not trying to stifle the whole conversation, but the gist of it is, money in the coffers is better right now. Most economists seem to be saying that.
Yeah, and this is what Europe learned through austerity in the global financial crisis. They tried to crack down on social services and public spending and all of that sort of stuff, and it killed their economies. Like, the idea is to get money into people's hands. And if that's giving nurses pay rises and doing hospital builds and doing up schools and those big projects that put money into people's pockets, that is good spending. Like that's the powerhouse of the economy. And there are so many examples of that through history. You know, it's what dug the world out of the Great Depression in the form of a massive war. So let's not do that. But it was still the government opening up the money taps to go and fight a war and do all of that sort of stuff. You know, like, not all spending is bad. And when Luxon goes, you know, I'm gonna like strangle bureaucracy, and he's talking about sacking like 64,000 bloody public servants. Like, what industry can you just point a finger at and go, oh, I'm going to gut this and make all of these people unemployed, and it's a good economic decision?
Yeah,
it's insane.
Yeah. And look, we should probably also cover off one thing, and I've got some information here, because we're talking about Liz Truss and what happened in the UK, and some people may not be quite aware as to what was happening over there. So there's an opinion piece from the UK that's actually on the this is from the New York Times, sorry, and this is actually on the Herald premium page, behind closed doors page, whatever you call that, premium, man. And this is an opinion piece by Tanya Gold from the New York Times, talking of Liz Truss. Prime Minister Liz Truss has ridden a roller coaster of ridicule. Her mini budget, on which she hung her free market credentials, was a disaster. Bond yields rocketed, the pound tanked, the markets, far from gratified, were distinctly upset. To mitigate the damage, she reversed a tax cut for high earners and was rewarded with more mockery. At the Conservative Party conference, protesters played loud clown music, and the police refused to intervene, as sure a sign of a failing administration in Britain as the storming of the Winter Palace in Russia. Top of all of this, there is more down here. It talks about tax cuts, it talks about all these sorts of things, and then it says, to judge from the polls, which puts Labour 33 points ahead of the Conservatives and Truss's approval ratings at -47, the country is in that camp too. So, some decisions were made, and I guess what Labour is trying to do is anchor national conservative tax policies to what happened over there and demonstrate that. And I think the Prime Minister said a real world experiment. There was a real world experiment, which is what happened in the UK, and how it basically had to get demolished immediately. Because remember, the big selling point at the moment from Mr. Luxon is inflation, is tax cuts, is the economy. Now, good time to bring up the conversation that he had with Jack Tame. Now, this is from April, so it's a little bit old, but I think it's important for us to be reminded of this. Jack Tame has just spent about 7 minutes previous to this clip here talking to him about, why do you need to get an $18,000 tax cut? And remember, there's that question that just cut to the core, which was, Mr. Luxon, do you need an $18,000 tax cut? To which Mr. Luxon said no. To which Jack Tame said, I'm paraphrasing now, well, why the fuck are you giving yourself one? Paraphrase. Paraphrase. It's a paraphrase. When there are some people on the lower incomes who are going to get like several $100s a year, who would love a few $1,000s a year. You know, why are you giving it? So that was where this all came from. And then they got into a bit of a conversation about tax cuts and what it does to this inflation that we're talking so much about, that National's talking so much about, to do with how bad Labour's spending is for inflation. And I'll just play this. It's only 60 seconds or so. I'll play this clip for you.
Most economists say that tax cuts are inflationary, right? You give people money, people want to spend the money. When they want to spend the money, it drives up demand. Voila, inflation. Why are your tax cuts different?
Well, the point is that Grant Robertson's about to give himself $6 billion, the biggest.
First thing you know, he straight away did not answer the question. And I guess you could say 4 months ago, all they were doing was saying how bad Labour is in their opinion, but he didn't answer the question. But he does come back to it and he does answer the question, so we'll keep going.
Increase in the budget in the history of New Zealand, right? And all of that's going to be inflationary. That's on top of the $128 billion that we've got. That's $52 billion more than we had in 2017.
Your tax cuts come out of that $6 billion. So you're still spending the $6 billion?
Correct.
So, okay, so why are yours not?
Our tax cuts come out of that, though, about $1.7 billion. We think it would be a good idea to do these inflation-adjusted tax thresholds.
So explain to me why it's not inflationary.
Because essentially, it's no more inflationally than Grant Robertson's $6 billion.
So it's the same. It's still inflationary.
Exactly the same. I would argue it could be slightly better because New Zealanders may choose to save their money and
I would argue, meaning, I better make sure it's not quite the same. So in other words, the tax cuts. So Labour bad, inflation bad, spending bad because of inflation. Our tax cuts exactly the same when it comes to inflation. It's just important to remember these things, you know, when you're thinking about these conversations that are going on a few months later.
Yeah, look, there's a really good case to look at how we structure our tax brackets and how they're taxed and that sort of thing. I just find it funny that a party like National will always talk about middle New Zealand until it's tax cut time. And then it's the top earners, the machinery of the economy, apparently. It's always them getting it. Whereas if you look at from a historical basis, in all of the countries when they had kind of essentially a golden age, you saw the guys at the top getting taxed like quite heavily. Like our taxes are reasonably moderate. But in the past, they've been much, much higher because, you can live a comfortable life and that sort of thing. And there's heaps of things that you can do to sort of, reinvest your money so you're not getting taxed and all of that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's always the brunt of it is the middle income earners. They don't tend to get very much at all. Once you're out of working for families, there's essentially nothing. What if that cut in tax revenue was aimed at making a larger portion of your earnings tax-free? I think they do that over in Australia. I'm pulling a number out of thin air, but I think it's somewhere around your first 20,000 is tax-free. That would make a significant amount of difference to lower middle income earners. And it's the same rules for everyone. So that's really hard to argue against. I would imagine.
Because we have a progressive tax rate, which means if you didn't tax the first, let's say 20,000, then those people earning 180,000 plus would still get that. It would just be more effective for the people who are earning 40,000 rather than 200,000. Let me say this as well. One of the reasons that was such a profound conversation he had with Jack Tame, and this is from interest.co.nz, this article, and it was about, the headline of the article it's from a few months ago, why the tax cuts National is proposing to ease the pain inflicted by inflation is likely to worsen the problem for now, at least. And he was saying, according to this article, Luxon argued the tax cuts wouldn't be inflationary, as they would be paid for by using the $6 billion expansion to the operating allowance. So for a while, he was actually arguing they weren't inflationary. So that was actually quite a monumental moment to get him to admit that they were the same, which means they are inflationary. They just weren't any worse. So what he's saying is they're not any worse, and you get money in your pocket, and you might save it, which will make it better. But I think it's pretty fair to say that if you're on the bottom end of the scale and you're being given $840 a year, which I think is what the bottom rate was going to be getting, there's not savings coming out of that. We're talking about the cost of living crisis and people who are already struggling and going backwards. They're going to go, oh, another $840 to put to my savings scheme. No, they're going to pay a bill, and they're going to, and $840 is $15 a week, and it's unrealistic.
A mortgage payment.
Whereas the person on $500,000 getting $18,000 a year who doesn't need it, that could go to savings, but not the people at the bottom.
The other problem that we have in New Zealand is how we've structured tax and investment and that sort of thing. Is that the safest thing you can do with your money is buy housing, a completely non-productive investment. There's no incentive to put it into local business or anything like that. That's another thing that could be looked at.
Yep.
And we keep coming back. It's a shame that it's been ruled out, but capital gains tax and that sort of thing, encourage people to point their money in a productive space. Yeah. Selling old houses to each other is not a great way to run an economy.
All right. Hey, let's unless there's anything in the chat there that particularly needs to come out right now. If you've noticed anything that you want to fire out there, if not, we'll move on to the next topic, which is just a couple of quickies. One of them is about Three Waters and about some of what the experts in the Three Waters industry are saying. Should we keep tracking?
Yep. Let's keep going.
So Three Waters and the industry representatives that gathered together over the weekend agree reforms are long overdue. Here's some from the report. There was there was 1,500 attendees from councils and companies across the motu for the Water New Zealand conference in Otautahi, which is Christchurch, on 18th of October. So 1,500 people from councils and companies talking about water infrastructure. So, the experts in the country, I guess you'd say. There was broad agreement in the water industry that reform in the sector has been a long time coming. The government's Three Waters plan, which is said to take water services out of the hands of councils and create 4 publicly owned companies to cover the country, is front and centre of the Water New Zealand conference in Otatahi, Christchurch this week. While attendees thought the plan had merit, right? So that's Three Waters plan had merit. Some believe it had not been well communicated or understood. I'm obviously going to go through some parts of this. Council conference delegate Robin Walker said the country's water infrastructure needed to be brought up to scratch. My honest view is that I believe it's the right thing for the country. I also believe that the legislation will be so far advanced that there won't be such a great opportunity for councils to opt out. So she's saying it's going to be, thinks it's going to be mandated in. 31 councils have joined together to oppose Three Waters in a group called Communities for Local Democracy. Another council delegate, Victoria Araba, said she understood why councils felt their voices were not being heard in the reform process. I feel like they feel the choice has been taken away from them and they're being forced to do something that maybe they could have accepted or agreed to do without being made mandatory. Councils should be better consulted with and taken on the journey with central government. And the last part of the story I'm going to read is Tiaki Environment Senior Environmental Engineer and Director Gavin Soul said most people in the water industry understood the reforms and why they were needed. So those on the inside understand the reforms and they understand why they're needed. But the public should be given more information, Soul said. Some people are very strongly opposed to it. I think their opposition comes from a cost point of view and an ownership point of view, he said. But actually, the ownership still stays with the councils, with the people. The costs, hopefully, should go down. And we do need a better partnership with the Treaty of Waitangi with iwi on board. The Three Waters plan would go ahead, despite opposition, he said. I think there is enough will in the industry that will actually push it through. Solitary councils or collectively a group of strong councils against it, I can't see that they'd have enough reasoning for it not to go through. So I guess there is a bunch of industry experts saying, you know what, people? It seems that lots of people have it wrong. And that this is something that's needed. And when you see some of the numbers about our water infrastructure and how much money needs to go into it, I mean, we are in Dunedin and our Three Waters is pretty good. My understanding from doing all the conversations with the mayors and a bunch in the council is that here in Dunedin, our sewage is pretty good, our drinking water is pretty good, our stormwater needs work. But places like Clutha next to us, I think it's $300 million over 30 years or $5,000 ratepayer is needed, something like that. So they can't physically do it. So it probably comes down to this idea that no matter what, places like Clutha and other places are going to be centrally funded because there is actually no other way. There are places in New Zealand where there's actually no other option other than central funding. So I guess the only question is going to be, will everyone be, quote unquote, forced into that centrally funded entity, or will they be allowed to be, kept on the outside? And I was thinking about it today. I don't know how much you know about this, Chewy, but Texas in America has its own power grid. So Texas has its own power grid.
Oh, yeah, I know all about this. Yep.
And they, because Texas is the Lone Star state and they're a don't tread on me state and they're a, states' rights, and they've kept their own power grid. So outside the national grid.
Absolutely not connected to the rest of the US grid.
Yeah. And what's been happening over the last few years is their grid has been failing. In fact, we all know the story about Ted Cruz going off to whatever the name of that place is, that holiday place in Mexico. I was going to say Cancun, off to Cancun, when his city was, I think, in a snowdrift, wasn't it? And it was in a snowdrift with no power.
Winter storm
with no power,
crashed their grid.
And one of the reasons that Texas's power grid is failing is because successive governors, senators, and politicians haven't wanted to have to charge the residents of Texas more for their power grid. so it's gone into disrepair. For the councils that choose to stay on their own, the danger will be, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but in 10 years from now, 30 years from now, that your pipes will be in disrepair, and then your pipes will be failing because your mayors and councils won't want to say to your voters, hey, by the way, guys, rates are going up from $1,300 a year this year to $3,500 because we need new pipes. So that's the danger moving forward, is that local councils, local bodies that want to stay independent, that also, there's two parts of this, that want to stay independent and they don't have the funding to sort out their three waters, their different water pipes, will be Texas in a number of years from now with a failing infrastructure.
Yeah, so I can see that coming back to bite people in a really big way. Like urban centres like Dunedin, Christchurch, Hamilton, all of those sort of guys, they're more compact, even though they've got more people. So there's a bigger payoff, I guess. You have to lay some pipe, but it's for a whole bunch of people. It's the smaller, more like the rural hubs like Clutha that are really going to be like, no, we don't like the government, we don't want to be part of this, and we've got, for good reasons or bad reasons, we don't want to be part of this. But I can just see them being left holding the can of an absolutely crumbling infrastructure for something that they just didn't see coming for, say, political or ideological reasons.
Yeah.
Part of me wants to go, okay, well, you're on your own. Good luck. But, there'll be real people paying the price of that if their groundwater's full of nitrates and they're all going to get cancer, or you've got elderly people and kids dying of Campylobacter and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that criticism that Three Waters has been badly explained or badly communicated, badly sold to people, I think that's very, very true. We've spoken about this quite a few times, getting our own heads around what it was. What's your average punter got a chance, of hearing about it? And like we've said before, it'll come down to misinformation or prejudice, ideological, political prejudices. I will decide on what side of the argument you fall on, when it should just be, we should have clean drinking water and the poop should go away from your house and go away from where your drinking water is. Yeah. That's something that everybody should, and at the start of this, everybody did agree on.
Yeah, and I think, just thinking about logically, you think about like Northland, for example, for those of you people who know Northland, north of Auckland, it's a really big body of land, and to run water pipes from, let's say, the northern edge of Auckland, which I think is about Warkworth or Wellsford, one of those two places, to the top of the North Island, right, or let's say to Whangarei, right, whether there's 1,000 people living on that line or 100,000 people, the distance of the pipe, albeit that there might have to be a bigger pipe for more people, but the distance of the pipe doesn't change. So whether you've got fewer people in an area but a large landmass, the pipes that go around that area are going to be need to be the same sort of distance as a urban centre where you've got more people to pay for that piping. So I that's what I say. I think that there's always going to be rural New Zealand. Look, we live in urban area here in Dunedin. Most people probably watching do, because that's where most of the population is. But when you're living in an urban area, I don't think Three Waters is quite such the problem. There are some examples that where it is, mind you, Havelock North is not really a city, but Napier, Hastings, out that way sort of more is. But if we live in a more populated area, a more densely populated area, we have more people to pay for our pipes, we can stay on top of it more easily. If we live in a more rural, sparse area where the pipes may still have to stretch miles, like a meter of piping, it's still a meter of piping, whether it's in an urban area or a rural area, then they're going to struggle to have safe, clean, healthy waters. And then they're going to struggle to pay for it because there's fewer ratepayers to actually pay for it. And it does irk me a little bit. I asked a bunch of the mayors the question about the funding for Three Waters. And I'll come back to the fact that, I'll be blunt, I think the only real thing that people can come back to about a genuine complaint about Three Waters is iwi. And I think it's not a complaint that is valid, in my opinion. But I think that's the only one they can come back to, which is why I think so much of the opposition of people who are informed is based in bloody racism, because so many of these people who fight against, why should I pay for their pipes, right, which is the other thing you hear, are happy to take the other people's money when there's a civil emergency in your neck of the woods. When Christchurch has an earthquake, the whole country funded the recovery for that. And, we're okay to do that. How is it any different if Havelock North's got pipes that are poisonous? Why shouldn't the whole country get behind that and help refund that to sort it out as well? So I don't accept the financial argument that why should we pay for them? Because that's how a country lives. When there's an issue in one area, other groups, other sectors, the rest of the country come together to help it. Some of these pipes, as we've heard about deaths in Havelock North, are a life and death issue. Yep. And other ones that may not be today might be in 2 weeks from now, or 2 years from now, or 20 years from now. So I just don't accept this idea if anyone's going to try and make it about having to fund the neighbours' pipes, because we fund the neighbours' stuff all the time when we want to. So that's why I come back to it. Seems to me that the people who are making noise about Three Waters, most of all, really the only thing they come back to, which I don't believe is valid, is the thing about the bloody Maoris. Oh, the bloody Maoris getting involved. That's why this is such an ugly argument on so many levels.
Yeah. I've got a criticism of Three Waters that I haven't really seen answered anywhere, is just to make sure that if we're going to go to this, that then can't be sold. Can't be privatized. Change in government and it all gets privatized, as we've seen in the past with many other things. That's my concern there.
Well, I mean, let me just bring back up the so-called experts, the experts that were at this thing. I mean, Gavin Soul, who was the senior environmental engineer, says very clearly that the ownership still stays with the councils. Now, maybe we need a bit more information about that, because if the ownership still stays with the councils, then the concern about privatization is kind of out the window, isn't it? Yep. I mean, I'm saying if, because I want to have that clarified, but if it still stays with the councils, then the privatization question is out the window, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
I'm going to pop up a comment and we're going to discuss this one.
All right.
It's not bloody Maoris. It's the point that it's a legit attack on democracy.
How?
Now, this I see pop up every time, and it makes me mad. When we talk about democracy, we're talking about it from a purely, let's just say it, the society that we live in is built on European standards and practices, and that's how we've set it up. And it just seems that everybody that wants to talk about an attack on democracy when we talk about co-governance is purely taking it from that it's giving up a little of our standards and practices that are set up on that European colonial system. They haven't even really spoken about in what form that takes. But when parties like ACT and David Seymour start talking about a binding referendum, I'll tell you exactly what's going to happen. The majority of people in New Zealand are European, and they're going to vote for the status quo, and the Māori can just fuck off, and you should consider yourselves lucky, which is another one of my favorites. Giving up a little bit of the pie is not going to destroy Western democracy. Let's just be real clear on that. Having Māori have a stake in this country's water is not going to destroy democracy. We are still going to have people voted into power. We are still going to have people voted onto committees. We are still going to have all of these things. It's just we are guaranteeing that the first people of this country have a say that they have been denied for decades. So that's my stance on that. It is not an attack on democracy.
I just think I think it's really quite simple. We have a contractual agreement based on the founding of the country. I mean, I'd call it the Treaty of Waitangi, call it whatever you want. We have a contract, and in the contract, it offers guaranteed representation. And whether we like it or not, that's the contract that's in place. And democracy, in its most simplest form, is like one person, one vote. It doesn't mean one person, one vote in every government entity that's out there. I mean, is there one person, one vote on Air New Zealand? Air New Zealand's aren't the board of Air New Zealand's not elected by the people. Why don't we hear people screaming about democracy? Democracy, Air New Zealand. We own 51% of it. And there's no democracy there. Well, it's because it's not how it works. What government entity do we elect people to? We don't. We elect in a democratic process the people to run the country. Those people make the decisions about government companies. It's got nothing to do with democracy whatsoever. And I just think it's a red herring.
We've spent the last 50 years trying to undo the damage that was done in the previous 100. You know, we signed a treaty and then we waited until there were enough Europeans here that we could start ignoring it. And that's what we've been trying to undo. It's like, if you want to talk about undoing democracy because it's unjust, a lot of what this country was founded on is patently unjust. And some people, when you try to redress that balance, take it as a personal attack. Nobody's saying that you're racist, but we can say that we live in a racist society.
I also think the idea about having a contract is, and this comes up a lot, you know, like, for example, getting rid of Māori seats and that sort of thing. If you have a contract with someone, you don't have the ability for one party to cancel the contract, right? Me and Chewy have a contract. If our contract is, if Chewy's renting my house, right, and it's a 12-month lease, Chewy just can't go, oh yeah, we're going to cancel this contract after 6 months. Now, if the two of us agree together to cancel the contract, that's fine. So for people who talk about, you know, and this is a bigger conversation now, but who talk about, you know, this founding document, this founding contract, whatever it is, and how it's time to move on and get away from it. It's like, well, that's an agreement that both parties need to make together. One party just doesn't actually decide this and say that's what we're going to do. At the moment, this is the contract that's part of New Zealand's life. And whether you like it or not, whether I like it or not, whether Chewy likes it or not, then that's the sort of rules, or certainly the foundation that we need to start everything with. We live in a multicultural country that's founded on a bicultural agreement, a bicultural contract. And that's what we're doing. And again, I'll say, I will listen to your bitching about this being undemocratic when you start bitching about Air New Zealand being undemocratic, when you start bitching about, is it Transrail? What's New Zealand Rail called? Whatever it's called, being undemocratic.
NZ Rail now.
NZ Rail. When you start bitching about New Zealand Post being undemocratic, because none of those places have elections either. They're all appointed people and appointed to a position. And I mean, I'd have to do the research on this. I will, and bring it in tomorrow. But I'm sure that they have iwi representation, and I'm sure they have, you know, cultural advisors and that sort of thing, because that's a part of how we do things in this country, based on the founding document or based on the contract that started this country. If you don't like it, how shall I say this politely? You can fuck off. It's what it is. I mean, it's what it is. I mean, I know that's probably a bit rude for some people, but it's what it is. That's the founding document. That's our founding contract. We're living by it. End of conversation, whether you like it or not. Should we do this last one that I talked about to do with, or we could hang it off for tomorrow night because we're already past 11. The M&M story.
Let's put that one in the pocket for tomorrow.
Okay. We'll do that for tomorrow.
We might, I think I know what our topic is tomorrow.
Oh, do you? Do you want to run the show tomorrow night?
No, I'm just, you've got Farmer Brown's big day off.
That's the groundswell thing?
Yeah.
Oh,
so we'll see how that goes.
I don't know too much about that other than watching a few headlines go through Twitter today. I did notice that Karen Plunkett was on Twitter today talking about David Farrier. David Farrier apparently has unblocked him. And Karen Plunkett, I'll throw it because I responded to him. I don't often do this sort of thing because, you know, Twitter's not, as Dave Chappelle says, he doesn't give a fuck about Twitter because Twitter is not a real place. Here we go. I'll bring it up. So Karen said, don't know if I should celebrate being unblocked by David Ferrier, to which I responded, probably the same celebration I had when you unblocked me. Meh. So, and the reason I'm bringing up Karen is because I saw something about groundswell come through the Twitterverse from him that I will, look, the people are now picking up on this idea. And look, not to sound arrogant, if you ever hear anything here that resonates with you as, oh, that's a good idea, that's a good way to word that, or that's a good thing to follow through, feel free to use it. And I can see that as it, how do you say this name? Burge Doug? Gutted I didn't get to vote on the board of TVNZ. Exactly. You know, the board of RNZ, you know, gutted I didn't get to do that. It's like people are making noise about this because they can at the moment. And I think it's like someone said last night, Labor bad, Labor supports Three Waters, therefore Three Waters bad. It's about as deep as that. And let's be fair, if it was national, then there'd be a bunch of raving lefties going, national bad, national supports Three Waters, therefore Three Waters bad. It's what happens with politics, and what I'm going to encourage you to do constantly. And I think I've done it tonight, actually, without meaning to, sort of defending Chris Luxon a little bit with Grant Robertson's, in my opinion, sort of juvenile attack, is that you play each ball on its merits. Walk and chew gum at the same time. If it's warranting support, support it. If it's warranting criticism, criticize it, no matter where it sits on the political spectrum. Don't be an ideologue that only ever accepts and agrees with one perspective based on where you vote, because then you become a zealot and it sort of becomes a pointless conversation, he says humbly.
Yeah. I'm just going to check out one comment before we go. Melvin Chand here say, do the Māori in power even represent the voices and will of everyday Māori? Most Māori I talk to don't feel like they don't, and quite frankly, done nothing for their people. That's up to Māori. That's their call, who they want to put up for their seat at the party, seat at the table. You could say that for any group of people in any democracy. You know, there are years where somebody in power doesn't speak for me, doesn't represent my beliefs, but that's how democracy works. All co-governance is guaranteeing that the other part, the signatory party of the treaty, has a guaranteed say, so that they aren't ruled by the tyranny of majority. How they decide to put up their representatives should be up to them.
Yep, I think that's fair. And it's like any kind of politics, I guess. If you don't like it, then get in there and change it. You know, if you're unhappy with it. And I mean, I think the Greens are probably the best example of this. When the Greens, and I use this term in a lovingly cheeky way, when the Greens first got into Parliament, they were a bunch of ferals, man. I mean, like what they were compared to what they are now, and they've evolved and they've changed, and now they kind of represent the same positions but in a different way. Some would say a more professional or a more political or a, I don't know, but it's different. They've evolved. If Māori don't like who's representing them in Parliament or in government, then they should get in there and change it. I think we'll just finish off with this one because it's quite a nice comment.
Ah, nice. There's a counter argument that didn't make it through YouTube's filter. Just saying.
It's a Facebook comment. Comment there. We don't get many Facebook comments because most people we watched on most of our 12 views an episode come off YouTube. All right, guys, we're done. We might talk. We'll talk Eminem another night. I will chase up Dr. Sharma, and we'll see. I think it's unlikely we'll get him on Friday, but we'll give it a crack. I mean, he might want to come on and have a chat with you guys about what's going on, and about who he is, and about what this whole story is around. And other than that, I think that's about it. All right, Chewy, you're a beautiful man. Remember, when are you going to try that thing tomorrow with the hot take the wallpapery thing? Is that for tomorrow?
I think I'll give it a crack. I'm not optimistic,
really,
but I will definitely give it a crack. Either that, or we've spoken to the flooring people that'll come and do it next week. But yeah, if I can do some of it, let's see how we go. Results will be discussed.
I just heard back from Gaurav Sharma. It's a form email. but it got through, obviously, the delay eventually, and I will chase that up tomorrow. Very cool. All right, team. We'll see you tomorrow night from 10 p.m. for another edition. Chewy, thank you, sir. Good luck with the floor. Everyone will come back tomorrow night, and that'll be the first question in the comments.
What is the situation with Chewy's
what happened
floor?
with the floor? That's the first thing we're going to want to know tomorrow night. So we'll catch you then, sir. We'll catch you all tomorrow night from 10 p.m. Thanks for joining us. All the best. See you tomorrow night from 10 p.m. Hooroo.